Time management for logging and writing. It's important, especially if you're in a market where you're filing for a 4 p.m. newscast. It's the earliest newscast you can file for. The general rule of thumb is that you need as long as your tape is at least to log it, because any successful professional will tell you that good writing starts with logging. I take it very seriously, especially on stories where I've had longer than a day. That's the dream. And here's a look at one of my most intense logs that was about a hockey game. Some of it may look like hieroglyphics. It's accounting for things that there is no time to talk about in this course because it is by far too nerdy. Like these carrots pointing left and right, representing screen direction, meaning is the action in the shot starting on the left or starting on the right of the screen. But with that, there are things that you will recognize, like if it's a wide, medium, or tight shot, or even an establishing shot for the start of the story, or a great ending shot to finish the story. And of course, always log your natural sound. This is going to be what brings your story to life. Notes about natural sound and video in general are great because as you're writing your track, you can make notes of what shots you want to cover your tracks and where you may want those nap pops. Now, obviously, write down the time code too. That's the only way that you will be able to instantly find the video when you're actually editing. If you shot 30 minutes in total, you'll need at least 30 minutes to log. And again, this is for if you were following somebody doing something or capturing moments. If a lot of your tape is the opposite and it's a lot of wallpaper B-roll or B-roll sort of like that, you won't need anywhere near this long because you know by looking at the first frame of video, the video that you have. So this whole particular video is about what you do when you have lots of good content to use. So as you start to follow people, capture some moments, really get into the videography of all of this, your tape's probably at first going to be 20 to 25 minutes long. A tight tape that creates a good package is 10 to 15 minutes, but that's a pro, and that's probably a 1 minute to 1:15 long package because it's a very lean tape. And keep in mind too, there may be only 1 or 2 moments in there. That photographer followed somebody for a short period of time. As you follow people, the meter, if you will, your tape just keeps rolling. So it can be very easy to have a tape, have raw, that is 20 to 25 minutes long and not this short 10 to 15 minutes. That hockey story I showed you was 2 to 2.5 hours of tape alone. But it wasn't a daily. It was shot at 7 p.m. on a Friday night and aired 23 hours later at 6 p.m. So again, one last note about tape length. Your 10 to 15 minute length is breaking news, spot news, or if you have a very limited time on the ground because of what you've been tasked to do that day. Maybe 3 VOSOTs in the package, 4 VOSOTs in the package, to where you can't spend that much time on the ground in any one place. So this video again is specifically going into what do you do when you have the opportunity to shoot a piece that airs 24 hours after you shot it, or even 48 hours. And the reason why that's important is after I did a handful of those, I could take some of those skills and actually do them while doing my dailies. So let's move on to writing. In a perfect world, you want an hour to write your story. But of course, you aren't always going to have that luxury, and depending upon if you're short-staffed and what size your station is, it may be like winning the lottery if you ever get that amount of time. There's certainly days where you're going to have to decide for yourself how much time you're going to spend shooting, logging, and editing, especially logging versus writing. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because I told you, hey, good writing starts with logging. So you're going to have to make some choices while logging that are going to kill you inside. They're going to be like, well, maybe I'll only have a nap pop at the beginning and maybe at the end, and then I'm just going to fill in the rest with regular beginning, middle, and end, new, now, next style, because that's frankly all the time I have to get this to air. And that's okay. Personally, I always chose logging over writing because then at least my great shots could make air. And you may feel differently. But then, of course, as I always made those decisions, I felt guilty because the writing suffered. And by that I mean the pacing of the piece. It was probably too fast and rushed. Also, too, I may not have had time to go back and put in as many details or facts as I wanted to. There are days where you're going to have to decide for yourself which one you're going to allocate more time to, logging versus writing. I personally would usually always choose writing because then at least my great shots, maybe some nat sound, and maybe a moment would make air. But then I would also always feel guilty because the writing probably suffered. And by that, I mean the pacing of the piece. It was probably far too fast and even rushed. Also too, I may not have had time to go back and put in as many facts or details as I originally wanted to because I used that time in logging. So again, you'll decide for yourself. And one big tip for you as you do this is to drop the sound bites into your timeline as you log the footage. As I log, I drop all the good sound bites into the editing timeline just to save time. It doesn't mean they make it into the finished piece. It just says, hey, here are the 5 or 6 that really are usable. I will transcribe them, and then when writing the story, I'll figure out which ones I'm going to use and which ones I won't. But here's the other cool thing about this too, because in the previous video, we talked about fresh sound for VOSOTs for later shows and even the morning show the next day. Some of those sound bites in that timeline that didn't make it into the package definitely made it into those VOSOTs. After all this, I will transcribe those sound bites in the timeline word for word, and at this point, I'll start writing the package, which we're going to talk about in the next video. I'll see you there.